it a little bit, truncated your bios just a bit, so we can kind of sweep through and kind of go at a, kind of flow. So, my name is Gloria Jones, and I'm really happy to be here. So let's get started. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Our first storyteller in the category of mysteries, since we're so close to Halloween, our theme is mysteries. And our first teller is Andy Lawfer. And Andy retired after a 25-year career with the California Department of Education. He is currently a gentleman farmer, storyteller, poet, and author. In 2021, he published Papa Lawfer's Stories, Positive Reflections on Life in America. I highly recommend it. These stories will make you laugh and they will make you cry. Andy is a board member as well. He manages and has created the website. He is a poet who helped secure this location. I give you Andy Lawfer.
Thanks, Lillian. Thanks, everybody, for letting me tell you a story today. So, Mysteries at the Cabin is the title of my story. There are two mysteries that I'm going to talk about. But before I get into that, isn't it odd how when we leave our comfort zone, leave our home, we start kind of feel odd, kind of start to get a little paranoid. Even going into the city or to a concert, you start looking, you're more aware of what's going on around you, right? You're not sure who to talk to and stuff like that, right? Even going to Disneyland, you hold on to your kid's hand a little tighter because you don't want to lose that kid, right? Well, nothing heightens your awareness more than when you're in the deep woods, very isolated. When I was about 12 years old, my parents bought a cabin in the woods on 5 acres, deep, deep woods. It was so deep in the woods that we would hoot and holler and shoot our guns and everything, and nobody would hear us. We were very, very isolated. Cute little cabin, very austere, 4 walls, tin roof, windows on either side. Had a ladder going up to a loft. It would sleep 5 or 6 people comfortably. Wood stove to keep the place warm. It did have some a propane stove too, to cook on and things like that. And no electricity, no water. And to add to the charm, it had a nice outhouse in the back. Yeah, it was a really great place to be. Still in the family, just needs a little bit of everything every once in a while to keep it up. And we've had it since I was 12 years old, so it's pretty old. Anyway, my parents decided to take us up. Shortly after they bought it, they took my brother, Michael, and my 2 sisters and me up to the cabin. And during the day, it was fine. It wasn't scary. We were exploring around and everything was really cool. Well, there was one moment. It was a bit scary. My father decided to try to teach my mother how to use a shotgun. And so my 2 sisters and I were standing behind my mom as my dad was over here showing her how to load the gun. And here's the trigger, so don't pull it while I go up the hill and put a target up there. Well, as he was walking up, my mom's going like this, and boom, the gun went off. The pine needles about a foot away from his feet just puffed up into the air. And he just froze. Well, he jumped about 3 feet and then froze. And we were all in stunned silence, looking at my mom, looking at my dad. And he turned around and he walked slowly to my mom and he took the gun out of her hands and he said, "That's enough for today." Oh my goodness. So that night, we're sitting around the campfire, just talking and stuff. And everybody had flashlights. And every so often, we shine the flashlights into the woods because we'd hear something. Typically, it was just leaves falling, but we couldn't, maybe an animal rustling around, but we really couldn't tell. And it was scary, right? Scary out in the woods. Even mom and dad, they become mama bear and papa bear, right? When they're out in the woods, more sensitive to sounds and stuff like that. But what was really chilling was when we heard off in the distance the roar of a mountain lion. They do that just before they want to get on their prey. It freezes them, right? And it did. It was bone chilling. The sound just kind of made us freeze right then and there. So that made us alert all night long. Finally go to bed, and we're sleeping, and everything's good. And all of a sudden, we get woken up by this noise. It's the side of the cabin. Like, what the heck is that? I'm like, is that a demon trying to get in? My sisters and I were frightened, we're like, what's going on? There's no light switch to turn on to go look or anything. And my dad yells to my brother, Michael, go get the gun. I got the flashlight. Follow me. So he runs out there. They put the shoes on, put the pants on. They charge out the door to go slay the demon. My sisters and I were, there's a little tiny window, and we're all looking out the window. It's one head above the other. Right? We're just kind of staring out the window. All we see is a flashlight. You can see the end of the flashlight, kind of going through the brush and stuff. We hear my dad tell my brother where to go, and then the light disappears and the voices disappear, and then there's nothing. No light, no sound, nothing. Then bang, bang! They shot. That's like, what is that? And so we were again looking at each other, and soon here comes the light, here comes the voices. They're not quite as urgent, but they're still excited. They walk up the stairs, plunk something down on the deck, and walk in heads high in victory. The next morning, we found out that the demon was a porcupine. So that mystery was solved. That thing was chewing on the side of the cabin, and it did a hole 3 feet tall and 1.5 feet wide. Apparently, the varathane that we use imparts a nice flavor to the wood. And he was, and night after night after night, scraping on the side of the cabin. Oh my God. Some 10 years later, I was 22 years old, I decided to go to the cabin by myself. Few more cabins around, but still very, very isolated. And in the interim between that 10 years, we had sat around the fire and we learned some stories like Mean Mackenzie's arm. Mean Mackenzie was a logger up there, and he had an accident and lost his arm. Well, when they took him to the hospital, they couldn't find the arm. And so legend has it that Mean Mackenzie's arm would float around in the forest all night long and look for an open window to a cabin or maybe a tent. And he would steal babies from the cabins. And if he didn't find a baby, he'd grab their neck and try to choke them. Okay. Then there's Bigfoot too, right? Bigfoot's always a good scary thing out there in the woods, out there in the thing. But in reality, we had 2 people break into the cabin when we were gone. One guy, so whoever they were, took everything that wasn't bolted down, just cleaned out the cabin. Another guy came in there and he trimmed his beard, cut his hair, and left it all in the washboard. It's disgusting, really. It was really creepy. And he left a dirty shirt. So all that, I'm up there by myself, and even I'm up there starting to, look in the woods with my flashlight just to make sure nobody's out there. Nothing was. But I had my dog with me, and so it was finally time for me and my dog to go to bed. And I take the dog, we go into the house, and I put a gun right next to my head on the bed, near the bed. And it was so dark out there, I could not see my hand in front of my face once the lantern was out. I mean, it was just pitch dark. Finally, I fall asleep. I mean, I am sound asleep. And then suddenly, boom, something hit the side of the cabin. I have no idea what it was. I woke up. I mean, I was deep sleep and then suddenly wide awake. My eyes were about this big. I reach over, I grab my gun, and I'm pointing it at the door. And man, if anybody came through that door, it was going to be the last door they ever to come in. I was scared to death. My dog was even growling. So it was real. It wasn't just my imagination. It was real. So I stood there for a long time, and I waiting. Nothing happened. So I finally put the gun down and fell back asleep. Next morning, I got up, figured it had to be a pine cone or a branch or something that fell off a tree, and there was nothing there. No footsteps, no branch, no pine cone, no nothing. And I just don't know what it was. What was it? You think it might have been Mean Mackenzie's arm? Bigfoot, some creepy dude trying to get a haircut. I don't know, but I had been up several times. That was a mystery that was unsolved. So I've solved the first mystery. The second one, I still don't know. But I have been up there several times by myself since then, and nothing like that's ever happened again. So I have no clue. So, but I do love going up there. It kind of helps ground me. And since I have 1 minute and 46 seconds left, I'm going to go ahead and read a poem that I wrote about being on a mountaintop. But it's called Grounded. When are our perceptions of life real? Is time in the big city contrived? Is hunger really a concern when there is plenty to eat? Are the sounds we hear and react to noises that clutter our thoughts? Are the emotions we feel while watching television based on reality? Is electricity just an aid to our lives, or does it place us in another dimension? Do the fabricated things we touch stir our hearts to deep imaginings? Become grounded on a mountaintop, where time is determined by the rotation of the earth and the position of the sun, where hunger motivates action to forage, hunt, or cultivate, where the sounds of the wild drive our thoughts toward peace, discovery, or warning, where our emotions are derived from physical and natural realities, where there is only one dimension, albeit rich in spirit, and where the things we touch are gifts to show us life is real. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. Be on the lookout for that arm. Yeah. Our next speaker is Edward Jones, my hubby. Okay. The Edward Jones, not that other Edward Jones with all the money. But anyway, the Edward Jones is a Toastmaster, author, blogger, podcaster, and life coach. He currently serves as the president of the Carmichael Toastmasters. Edward is well versed in presenting prepared, impromptu, and extemporaneous speeches. As a life coach, he helps middle managers effectively address office politics by applying his listening and speaking skills. I bring you Edward Jones.
I don't know if you can hear me okay or not, but
No, you have
gotta use the mic so you can get behind there. All right,
because of Zoom.
all right, we got it. So had anything happened to you that is inexplicable? You didn't cause it, but it just happened. Was it fate, superstition, or just a coincidence? Now, this is my first rodeo on the storytelling stage, so I am going to need some help. This is something they used to call and response. So I will say something, and then when I do this, I want you to say, it's just a coincidence. Now practice this, say, it's just a coincidence. An example would be, I ate organic food and I feel better. Was it the organic food or just a coincidence? There was a baseball player. He was in a slump and he was really depressed. So between games, he didn't shave. On the day of the next game, he overslept. No time to shave. So on that day, he gets 2 hits and a home run. He's now out of that slump. Was it because he didn't shave, or was it just a coincidence? Well, it could be. Now, this is one thing that's actually right now. The New York Mets are in the NL playoff. In June, a thing called a grimace. Do you know what a grimace is? It's a little McDonald's character. They had somebody in a grimace suit throw out the first pitch in June, and ever since then, the Mets have been winning. Right now, they're in the playoff with the LA Dodgers. If you're an LA Dodger fan, you don't want to hear this. But they are now winning because of that. They believe it's the grimace. Now, was it the grimace or just a coincidence? Now, I'm a logical, analytical person. I think there is an explanation for everything. So that's how it works. But let me take you back to 1975. Right after I graduated from college. This was a time where you had to write out your cover letters, your resumes, had to do landline phones, and you had to talk to people face to face. That's how it was in those days. My granddaughter doesn't understand that. But that's where we are. That's where we were back in those days. I moved to Chicago because I was looking for a job. I stayed with my sister. One evening we're talking, and she said, I started reading this book, and strange and mysterious things started happening. I said, give me an example. I put my keys on the nightstand, and the next morning they were on the kitchen counter. And I said, maybe you just forgot and left him there, and they didn't, she said, no, it's happened more than one time. I'm thinking, that sounds strange. Was it the fact that you read the book? Or was it just a coincidence? So I said, I'm going to prove her wrong. I'm going to start reading this book. And then strange and mysterious things start happening to me. At first, they were small and subtle. For example, I'm a self-starter, a driver. But after a while, I was there to look for work, and I start losing my motivation. I started to lose my edge. One day, I didn't even go out to look for work at all. That's not like me. I felt a little bit bad about that one. So the next day, I went out the house at about 11 o'clock, got downtown Chicago at noon. Now, what driver goes downtown at noon at lunchtime to look for a job? Well, the thing that happened is that, needless to say, I didn't do well that day. But when I got home, my sister's apartment had been burglarized. Someone took my record player, that's what they called them in those days, took the record off, laid it aside, stole the Wi-Fi. I guess they didn't like my musical taste. So they left that behind. Now, was it the fact that I was reading the book? Or was it just a coincidence? At any rate, so the police came, they were taking the report. And then this mysterious woman shows up, claimed to be a friend of my sister. After the report was taken, she took me to dinner to get my mind off of the incident. My sister had been working late that day. When she got home, I described the woman, and my sister said, I don't know anybody who fits that description. I need to get rid of that book. And then I started looking for a job with great vigor, looking for a job. And I went to Roosevelt University, went to their library, looked at a job that my former boss and mentor had suggested that I look into at the University of Cincinnati. I applied for the job and got it. And I thought, everything is well. That book had nothing to do with anything. Saw it laying on the counter, start reading it again. I'm thinking, I can show my sister that that book means nothing. And then that strange woman shows up a day before I was supposed to go to Cincinnati. I tell her about the good news. She said, well, let's go downtown and celebrate. You can meet with some of my friends. You can celebrate before you leave. They wanted to stay longer than I wanted to, so I took the subway back in Chicago. The subway's called the L. So I took the L back because it's only a block from the stand was only a block from where she lived. And I looked up as I was walking on the street, and there's a car straddling the sidewalk. At first I think, is that my car? As I got closer, I realized that it was my car. What had happened was somebody stole a U-Haul truck and took a premature right turn, and they hit my car and drove it up on the sidewalk. According now, was that because I was reading the book? Or was it just a coincidence? So what I did was the car was totaled in insurance terms, but still drivable. But it looked horrible. So at any rate, so what I looked at, so I took that out, and then I said, I gotta get rid of that book. I cannot have another coincidence. I gotta drive 300 miles from Chicago to Cincinnati. No more coincidences. So I said, I thought, so I threw the book away. So I get to Cincinnati, get my apartment, start the job, and a few weeks later, I look on the shelf. Oh, no. There's the book. I got to get rid of this book once and for all, so I put it in the garbage can. I think I've gotten rid of it, so I thought. The next morning I wake up, my car is gone. And I'm thinking, the book was in the garbage can, it was laying beside the garbage can. Was it the book? Or was it just a coincidence? So I called the police, they take a report, I called the impound department, and they say they don't have it. A few weeks later, they called me back and said they had it, actually did have it, but the impound fees had really mounted. So I had a choice. Pay those fees or get the stuff out of the car and let them keep it. I chose to let them keep it. But I found out that was not a coincidence. Gloria and I had just started dating. I had bought another car. I let her use the old car. She amassed a number of tickets, parking tickets, but didn't tell me. So that was not a coincidence. But in closing, in closing, I can't remember the actual title of that book, but I'll know it if I see it. I don't know if the mysterious and strange things happened because of the book, or if it was just a coincidence, but I'm not taking any chances. I think I got rid of that book, but I'm not quite sure. It might be in the garage in a box somewhere, or it could be upstairs in a closet. Gloria said that a light came on at 2 o'clock in the morning inexplicably, and a globe just came on. So maybe it's still there. But if there's an analytical, logical person or anyone else who wants to try that book, I'll give it to anybody who wants it. Are there any takers? Thank you.
Good job.
I did not get those tickets. I don't know what happened to that car.
Just a coincidence.
It was just a coincidence.
Mm.
Anyway, okay, is Terry here? Terry, okay, yes, you are. Terry is another one of our longtime storytellers who has been on the board for many years. With her background as a librarian, she has a wealth of knowledge about this craft. Besides being a captivating storyteller for adults, she mesmerizes children. So we are going to be mesmerized, even though we're adults, by Terry today. Thank you, Terry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can usually be heard without one of these, but I will bow to Zoom and do it today. My story is the story of the tinker and the ghost. A long time ago, on a wide plain in Spain, outside the city of Toledo, stood a great gray castle. But no one ever came near the castle because it was haunted. And every night, people could hear a thin, sad voice wailing inside the walls of the castle. And on one night of the year, All Hallows Eve, a light would flicker and die in the chimney of the castle. Oh, many men, brave men, came to the castle and, well, they were going to get rid of the ghost, nothing to it. But every morning, the people of the village would come to the castle and they would find the bodies of those men sitting still and lifeless in the great hall of the castle in front of the fireplace. None of them ever lived. The owner of the castle became so desperate that he offered a reward of 1,000 gold reales to anyone who could rid the castle of his ghost.
We've got a chair being
It
delivered.
actually begins when a brave and jolly tinker named Esteban came to the village near the castle.
That's
And
great.
he happened to arrive on Hallows Eve. And while he was sitting in the town square, mending the pots and pans, for as you have to explain to kids these days, That's what tinkers did. So he was mending the pots and pans, and the women of the village came to him and they told him about the haunted castle and how there was a reward of 1,000 gold reales for anyone who could rid the castle of its ghost. But no one ever had. Well, I'm a brave and jolly tinker, said Esteban, and I'll spend the night at the castle. I'll spend tonight. I'll keep the dismal spirit company. I can do it. But I do like good food and a warm fire. So I have some things that you must get me. I want a dozen eggs, a side of bacon, a flask of wine, and some wood to build a fire. Well, the people of the village were glad to bring him those things, and he loaded the provisions on the back of his donkey and set off for the castle. The castle was the top of a hill, so he had to climb this road up to the hill. And as he did, the wind whipped through the trees, and flashes of lightning bolted across the sky. But Esteban kept on going. When he got to the castle, he tied up his donkey in the courtyard, and he gathered all his possessions together, his provisions, and he entered the great hall of the castle. And oh, the air was damp and dank, and cobwebs brushed against his face, and he could hear bat wings fluttering up above him. But he kept on going till he got to the fireplace, and he set everything down, and then he gathered the sticks and built himself a little fire in the fireplace. Then he cut off some strips of bacon, put them in the frying pan, and stuck it on the fire. And as soon as the smell of that fire went up through the chimney, a voice came down through the chimney. Oh me, oh me, look out below, I'm falling. And with that, there was a loud thump on the hearth, and there was a man's leg, a good enough leg, too, wearing a half of pair of brown corduroy trousers. Well, Esteban just moved it aside, and he went back to having his fire and frying his bacon. Oh me, look out below, I'm falling. And there was another leg, just like the first. Well, by that time, Esteban was finished frying his bacon, so he started eating his bacon and frying an egg. And as he did that, he heard the voice again. Oh me, look out below, I'm falling. Well, fall away, said Esteban, but don't land on my egg. And with that, there was a very loud thump on the hearth, and there was a man's trunk, the part of his body from here to there. And a fine trunk it was, too. Esteban just moved it aside with the legs. And then he, oh me, look out below, I'm falling. And there was a man's arm fell down and landed on the hearth. And then another arm. Well, said Esteban, this is everything except a man's head. And I'm curious. I'd like to see that head. Well, he didn't have to wait long, for the voice came again, a little louder, a little clearer. Ooh me, look out below, I'm falling. And with that, there was a loud thump on the hearth, and there sat a man's head. Oh, it was a good enough head. It had piercing dark eyes and a long black beard. And Esteban just sort of moved it aside a little. And as he did, he said to the head, he said, well, and then all of his good thing he had moved it aside, because then right there in front of him, the pieces of that man began to come together. And there stood a man, or the ghost of the man, for it was a ghost. And Esteban said, oh, would you like some bacon and eggs? I eat no food, said the ghost. but I must tell you, you are the bravest man that has ever come here to this castle. You're the only one that has ever seen me bring the parts of my body together. The others all died before I was half through. And if you will do what I tell you, you can become a very rich man. Well, Esteban liked the sound of that, so he nodded his head. And the ghost said, well, many years ago, I stole 3 bags of coins and I brought them here to the castle and I buried them in the courtyard. But robbers came and cut the parts of my body to pieces, but they never found the coins. They are still out there in the courtyard. And with that, the ghost led Esteban out to the courtyard. And the ghost said, there are copper coins, there's a bag of silver coins, and a bag of golden coins. And now he stood in front of a tree and Mark pointed to the ground. He said, you dig. Dig yourself, said Esteban. So the ghost dug. And sure enough, he brought up 3 bags of coins. And he said, now you give the copper coins to the poor, silver coins to the church, gold coins you may keep for yourself. And now you must do exactly as I say. Strip my body of its clothes so that my soul can go to rest. Well, Esteban nodded his head, stripped the clothes from the ghost, and the ghost disappeared. And Esteban just threw the clothes out into the courtyard, went back into the castle with his bags of coins, and slept for the rest of the night. Well, of course, the next morning, the people of the village came to bury him. But when they got to the fireplace, there was Esteban sitting in front of the fire eating bacon and eggs. You're alive, they said. Oh, so I am, said Esteban. And the ghost of the castle is gone, gone forever. His soul is at rest. His clothes are out there in the courtyard. So, of course, the people rushed out to the courtyard to see his clothes. As for Esteban, he just loaded everything on the back of his donkey. And, with that, he did exactly as promised. He gave the copper coins to the poor, the silver coins to the church. He kept the bag of golden coins. And with those golden coins and the 1,000 gold reales, that tinker, Esteban, that brave and jolly tinker, lived a long and happy, rich and easy life for a long, long time. And that's the Tinker and the Ghost. I have to say, the librarian in me says that I found this from a book called When the Lights Go Out, stories collected by Margaret Reed MacDonald, who actually at one time lived here in Sacramento and was an interesting storyteller because when she talked to you, she had a stammer, but I never heard her stammer when she told a story. And what makes her stories, if you've never tried to memorize a story, a folk tale, what makes them easy to learn to tell is that she doesn't, this is, I think that's this, I've got Tinker and the Ghost here. It's not in solid printing across the entire page. Her stories are always told as you would tell them. And when she has a word that's important, it's always in big print. And then there's 3 dots or 4 dots after a word like falling. So I would say if you can find any copies of, she has many books on different themes, animal story collections or whatever. It's worth, if you ever find a copy at the book den, you might be able to get one for 25 cents, and it would be a good investment if you're thinking about storytelling.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Terry. That was a very nice story. Very nice story. I could use some gold myself, but okay. Our next teller is Karen Daly, and she has been telling stories all her life. Just ask her mom about the whoppers she told as a child. But she learned to hone her communication and speaking skills in her many Toastmasters clubs over 34 years. Karen is a longtime member who has served as treasurer on the board. She's a lively storyteller with fascinating personal stories. Karen is also a polished MC. So, Karen, we are anxious to hear what you have said.
Thank you for embellishing my story. I hope it sound better. Mine is a personal story, personal and true. It was 1995, and my then boyfriend and I were sitting and reading the newspaper at Christmas time and read that Nevada City was having a Victorian Christmas. They decorated the town and they actually had tours of some of the old houses. We said, boy, that sounds like fun. So we called and said, oh, we got the last 2 tickets for the tour. We were so excited. So we decided we'd leave early and did some shopping around the town, which was darling. And then we decided, well, let's have the dinner at the old hotel because the tour didn't start to 7 o'clock, I believe. So we're sitting there having our dinner, and all of a sudden, I had this chill go right up my spine, and the hairs on the back of my head stood up. And I said, there's someone here. And he looks and he says, oh, yes, I see her. There's a young girl that just came in running and hid under the piano. We didn't think anything of it. So at the end of our dinner, we asked the hostess. He had seen a little girl hiding under the piano. And she says, oh, yes, we call her Abigail. And Abigail comes about the same time, but very seldom do people see her. We believe she came during the fire of 1955 that demolished the town except for 2 buildings, that she came into the hotel hoping that it would save her. So we knew the mystery of the little girl that he saw. We went on the tour. I think there were probably 4 houses on the tour. And we went through the houses. When we got to the 3rd house, when I stepped inside, I felt that chill go up my back, and the hairs in the back of my head just stood up. And I said, there's an entity here. And he says, I know, but I have to leave. So he stepped out. Now, I don't know about any of you, but when I gone house hunting, I could walk in a house and tell you whether it's a happy house or a sad house. This was a sad house, and there was definitely an entity there, but it was a beautiful house. Oh, this sweeping staircase. It was one of the most beautiful staircases I've ever seen. But when I stepped out with my boyfriend after the tour, he said, I couldn't stay there. I couldn't lose the ghost hanging from the staircase. I said, okay, I can understand. There was nothing else for the rest of the tour. We loved the tour and went home. Now, I have to tell you, I believe that was ESP. And I think all of us are born with ESP. Just some people develop more. Some people are very scared when something like that happens. Like, what is happening? How many of you have had deja vu? Walked into a place and swear you've been there before, but you've never been. Or you've heard that before, but you're not quite sure. Did you really hear it before? I've had many incidents. I was friends with my friend in San Jose, and I walked into her house and I said, "Oh, Patricia, you got a cuckoo clock, and the staircase is the perfect spot." She stopped, she turned around and said, "How did you know?" You see, they had just bought that cuckoo clock on the weekend, and her husband had just put it up there. How did I know? I believe I dreamed it. A lot of my ESP comes in my dreams. I've even known I was going to be in an accident. I didn't know where, I didn't know when, but I heard the person hit me in the back end. And lo and behold, 2 weeks ago, a taxi cab ran right into my back end. Things happen in our lives, and we're not always sure why. Maybe it's coincidence. We've heard of that. But I truly believe it's ESP. I think a lot of people have it, and when it comes to some people scared, I don't want to know any more about that. Other people will say, "Okay, it happened, so long." And then there's people like me that I'm kind of in between. I know things happen. I know I sense things. I've seen auras around some people. Mostly it's if they're very strong auras. If they're depressed, I definitely see a blue aura around the person and will try to make contact. Or if they're very happy or very peaceful, they have a beautiful yellow glow. And I just want to reach out to them and give them a hug so I can get some of that wonderful feeling myself. And other times, they're just a chill on my back. I know there's something there. What is it? I don't know. But I bet if I developed it, I might be like my boyfriend at the time, who saw clearly the little girl hiding under the piano.
That was great. You had me all interested in everything and thinking, do I have ESP or ESPN or whatever? Anyway. Okay, let me get this. Now, I think I have my people right. Just a second. Okay. Our next teller is Mark Berry. Now, I have some people's bios here and some there. I am not known for being organized, as you can see. Okay. Mark's grandfather had been a cowboy in his youth. Mark's earliest memories were listening to Grandpa tell yarns from dawn to dusk, and about riding his pony and herding the doggies. Adopted into 3 Native American nations, as an adult, he was fascinated with oral tradition passed on by the elders. So when he was young, he learned some stories in order to be included. As a pastor, congregations enjoyed his Sunday talks best when they included a story. He still prefers to listen and learn. Let's give Mark Berry a hand.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, everybody. Gosh, it's great to see you all here. This story takes place in the fall, just kind of this time of year, except it starts in the spring. I was about 8 years old, and in the springtime, we went up to the cabin. The cabin. Well, my great uncle had a gold mine up in the area of a little town called Iowa Hill, a couple miles past Iowa Hill. Iowa Hill is 16 miles east of Colfax, in case you want to place it. And back then, that 1 lane road was such that it took 45 minutes to drive the 16 miles from Colfax to Iowa Hill. So it was really, really rural. The kind of folks that lived there liked their privacy, and if they weren't recluses. And the sign on the town, the little population sign on the town said population 16. And yes, that counted the dog. Yes, and we went up there this spring and we were gonna open up the cabin. You see, it snows so much up there. It's right on the edge of Tahoe National Forest that you can't get in the wintertime. There's no way, no access. So we went up and my dad and I went up in the spring and oh boy, I'm 8 years old. I live in San Francisco. I'm a city kid. And everybody in 1953 who was 8 years old was watching on TV. We were watching Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett and all those kind of shows. And so when I got to go up to the cabin, oh boy, when I got up to go to the gold mine and get out of the city, man, I was just adventure time. Well, this time we stopped at the little Iowa Hill store. Simply, we called it the store. Well, it was a lot more than that. It was the mayor's office, the post office, the little grocery store, the saloon, the one working telephone, the gas station, and probably 6 other things that I'm forgetting, all under one roof. And so when we went in there, my dad immediately goes to the bar to get his beer. He was big on beer. And I was looking around and I noticed there was some kind of a commotion over in the little grocery store part. So I went over to see what was going on. Well, what was going on was they had this little tiny baby deer, little white polka dots and spindly legs like it had just been born. It turns out that on that treacherous, windy road, somebody accidentally killed the mom in a car accident. And so now here's this little deer. And what on earth are we going to do with that? And everybody was trying to figure out what to do to help that little thing. And finally, after trying many things, Mrs. Baxter, Mr. and Mrs. Baxter owned the store at that time. She's got a few cornflakes and a lot of cow's milk, and she made kind of a slush. And she thought about a Playtex living glove. Didn't have baby bottles there, so she took a Playtex living glove and cut the tip off one finger and put the slush in there. And that little guy started to eat, and he was so hungry. He was just eating, 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 eating. And people got tired of holding him, so we'd take turns holding, feeding the. And when it was my turn, I want you to know, here I am. I'm feeding Bambi, you know. I'm just in another world of happiness and joy, holding that glove and feeding that little guy. It was so fun. Well, he made it that day, and he made it the next day. So the town folk decided, well, we better give him a name. So they put all their heads together, and the name they came up with was Buck. We're going to call him Buck the Deer. Somebody changed the sign to 17, and he was now a member of the community. And now I'm going to fast forward 4 years down the road. I'm now 12 years old. Now we're going up this time of year. We're going up in the autumn to close up the cabin for the winter, put all the heavy shutters and everything because it'll be snowed in for a number of months. And I'm a big kid now. I'm 12 years old, I just know what's going on in the world. So this time when we stopped, it was evening time. So we stop at the store, a couple people in there shooting pool and some music going on. And of course, my dad went right for the bar for the beer. It always does. And I went around back. There's a back door. And I went out back to see if my old friend Buck might be around because what the Baxters did was they didn't lock him up or anything like that. He was a growing, thriving deer person, and but they did plant a lot of really nice greens. They planted some beautiful lettuce and spinach out back. And Buck went off to be a deer, and he came back a lot. He was like a pet, and I know everybody in Iowa Hill thought he was their own personal pet, but let me tell you, he was my own personal pet. So I went out back to see if Buck was out there, and he was. He's older now. He's big and he's well fed, and he's just glistening coat and a rack with 6 points on each side. And he is Buck the deer. I swear to God, he looked just like Bambi's father in the movie. He was beautiful. So I was out there hugging old Buck, and getting reacquainted and petting and all that kind of stuff. And well, I'm a big kid now, so I went in the saloon to be with the guys, and I was in there. I was going to try and see if they let me shoot pool, even though the table was up here, but I just want to be a guy. At that time, all of a sudden we were blinded by the light. All of a sudden you couldn't see a thing for these incredible lights that were shining through the windows. And when the lights went out, and we all kind of tried to look out the window, there was this vehicle, and it was big, and it had a lot of lights on it. And these two guys crawled down out of that vehicle and came into the tavern for a beer. Well, I gotta tell you, there's one thing about those hill folk, those Iowa hill folk. They don't cater much to flatlanders. And luckily I was accepted as a resident because we had a place up there. But they would do anything they could to harass and tease and haze any flatlander. They just made fun of those poor people that didn't know nothing. And so these two guys come in. They look like they just stepped out of a sporting goods magazine. They had all the latest stuff. They had the Gore-Tex on, and they had the gaiters, and they had zippers everywhere, and they had stuff just dripping off of their outfits. This was a whistle, that was a compass, this was I don't know what half of the stuff was. These guys, they had the hat. I seen it in the catalog. The hat you can wear 12 different ways with the camouflage and all that stuff. They had that hat. And these two great white hunters came in and flopped down at the bar and served their beer. And they started complaining. They started whining. They said, we wasted our whole vacation. We came up here in these mountains. We heard there were deer up here. There are no deer. We've been up here for 3 days. Our whole vacation wasted. We never saw a deer. We never saw a sign of deer. And we're just so disappointed. And we tried a blind. We tried rattling. We tried the doe urine scenting. We tried everything, and there's no deer around here. And the Flatlanders, almost like they rehearsed it. They just, one after another. They said, what do you mean there's no deer here? We are overrun with deer here. The other day, I forgot to latch my screen door, and they walked right in the kitchen looking for some bread or something to eat. And then, Bob, didn't you tell me about your pickup truck? He said, yeah, I forgot to roll the windows up, and they nibbled on the upholstery. They're everywhere. Deer stories. And these Flatlanders weren't having a bit of it. They knew when their leg was being pulled. They weren't believing any of it at all. Well, about that time, Mrs. Baxter over there behind the bar, she caught my eye and she nodded her head towards the back door. And I didn't know what was up, but I sure didn't want to miss out on anything. So I kind of nonchalantly went to the back door as if anybody would notice me anyway. And when Mrs. Baxter and I got out to the back door, there was Buck. But now it was hunting season. And so what she did during hunting season is she put a great big red bow around his neck. The most ridiculous, silly looking thing, like you tie up a new car with this bow. And so, she's untying the bow, and we're getting Bo's front end headed towards the back door. And I got the picture now, so I'm helping getting Buck arranged. And she finally gets that huge, ridiculous ribbon off of his neck. And she goes, yeah. And so I give Buck a friendly pat on the rump, and he goes into the saloon. Now he's got those black, shining, hard hooves, and the saloon is made of plank floors, and it sounded like a machine gun when you right through there. Bam, 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 bam. And everybody looks up, and he ran in between the pool table and the bar, right in front of those two Flatlanders that were sitting there in all their Gore-Tex. And then the hill folk chimed in. They said, Baxter, can't you keep that door closed? That's a third one in here. Can't you keep him out of here? We got to run with it. The two Flatlanders didn't say a word. They put down some money on the bar. They went back in their vehicle, and they went back down the hill, put, never to be seen again. That's called hunting season, starring Buck the deer.
Thank you so much, Mark. I love deer, even though they used to eat my impatiens when we lived in Illinois. Sometime I would come home from work and there would be 9 of them resting after having eaten my impatiens. Anyway, some of you might like to have a little snack now yourself. So we're going to take a little break. And we'll get back here in about how many minutes? 10 to 15 minutes. 10, 15 minutes. Okay. All right. Thank you. We are starting again. And our next teller is anxious to tell for us, but I'll wait till you get seated a little bit. Okay, our next teller is Linda Kennedy. Yes, yes, yes. Linda is one of our favorites, a former Guild Board member and beloved storyteller. Linda has shared stories at the Sierra Storytelling Festival open mic, as well as hosting it. Recently, she has shared stories again in the Bay Area with a flock of outstanding storytellers. And by the way, ask her about that really good chicken salad she makes.
She won't tell us the rest.
Oh, wait. First of all, who wrote that? Who wrote that piece? Something about, oh, thank you. You wrote it? About the chicken salad?
Oh, no, I apologize. I thought you were talking about the program, sorry.
I think Ed Lewis had something to do with it.
It just came to me on paper.
The telling in the Bay Area with a great flock of tellers is a Zoom concert on November 22nd through the Menlo Park Library. Yeah, so somehow or another that just got,
Okay.
yeah, so I've told their 3 other years for their program, but this one coming up is the one.
I see, okay.
And maybe I can put some information out so y'all can tune in and watch it. It'll be a Zoom concert. So it'll be a lot of fun. It'll have BZ Smith too, which we haven't heard in a long time. So that'll be great. Yeah. I'm not using up my time. I'm just, okay. Oh, I am using up my time. That darn clock has started. I usually don't tell fairy tales. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever told a fairy tale at one of our guild meetings. Is that better? Is that better?
Yeah.
But today I'm going to tell a fairy tale. The basic difference, if for those of you who may or may not know, of a fairy tale and a folk tale, is a fairy tale has an author. The person who wrote this fairy tale, I don't know his name. I looked at it and I decided I would not try to pronounce it. It was first published in 1898, and it was written by a wonderful fairy tale author from Japan. Joji lived on a farm with all of his sisters and brothers, his mother and his father. And in that time and in that place, years and years ago, it was the tradition, the custom, that if you lived on a farm, everybody pulled their weight. You did the work to help make that farm work so that you all had at least something to wear and a place to sleep. But Joji did not want to be a farmer. All Joji wanted to do was draw. But his father would say, Joji, come out in the field and help me. Joji said, okay. And he'd get out there, but he'd see a stick. He'd pick the stick up and he would start to draw in the dirt. And all that Joji would draw would be cats. He would draw sleeping cats, creeping cats, crawling cats, all kinds of cats, biting cats, fighting cats, luxurious cats, curious cats, cats. One day his father said, you will never be a farmer. I'm taking you to the temple. I will see if the priest will train you to be a priest. So Joji gathered up his things, including all of his art supplies. He went to the temple with his father. The priest was more than happy to say, yes, he can come and be here and I can train him to be a priest. Joji was a very bright boy. He did well with his lessons. But when he saw the long temple walls that were lined with folding screens of white rice paper, he could not help it. He got out his brushes, he got out his ink, and he started drawing cats. He drew creeping cats and crawling cats, pawing cats. He drew sleeping cats and fighting cats and biting cats. He drew cat's paws, cat's claws, cat's thighs, cat's eyes. He drew cats. But when the priest came in and saw what he had done to that sacred temple, he said, Joji, you will never be a priest. You must leave tonight. So Joji went to his room. He gathered up his knapsack. He put his clothing in it and all of his art supplies. And he went to the door where the priest was waiting. The priest opened the door, and a cold, bitter wind blew in with some leaves. And the priest stood outside and he listened. He came back and he said, Joji, something ominous is out beyond. Be careful on your journey. Now, as you go down this road here ahead of us, if you get tired, you will find, not too far down the road, an abandoned monastery, a temple where you can go in and get some rest. But listen to my words, listen. Beware of large places. Stay only in small spaces. And with that, the door closed and Joji went down that road. The full moon was out, but sometimes it was more like slivers and shimmers because of the wind and the leaves on the trees. But he found his way and he got to that temple. It looked like there was nothing inside. Through the windows, there was no light at all, but every once in a while there was a flash of light. And he said, oh, that must be just the moonlight. He opened the door and he went in. And he was so surprised to find that it was just a long hall. And on each side were folding panels made of white rice paper. He put his knapsack down. He got out his brushes and his ink. And he began drawing cats. Sleeping cats, creeping cats, pawing cats. Curious cats, luxurious cats, cat's eyes, cat's thighs, cat's paws, cat's claws. He drew cats, cats, cats. And when he was finished, he realized how tired he was. And he remembered the priest's words. Beware of large places, stay only in small spaces. But there was this huge room. But at the end was an altar. And the altar table sat on a small cabinet that had a small sliding door. He opened the door and he crawled in. He had to curl up tight with his knapsack on his lap in order to fit. He closed the door and he went to sleep. But in the middle of the night, there was a crash, there was a smash, there was a howl, there was horrible screaming and just tumbling and rumbling. He did not know what was happening out there. And then it became quiet. The room was dark. He was not going to open that door and go out there. So he sat there and he trembled in that little space until he saw a little stream of sunshine coming through under his cabinet door. And he crawled out. And what he saw in the middle of that room was horrific. He saw a goblin rat the size of a cow that had been shredded to pieces, its eyes torn out, and a mote of ribbon of his own blood was going around that goblin. When he could no longer look at it, he looked up at the wall, and there were his cats. But the cats that had been lying down were now in a pounce. The cats that had been sitting were now on their backs with their claws up. And every single cat had blood dripping from its claws and from its teeth. And it was that moment that Joji knew that he would never be a farmer. He would never be a priest, because he knew he had the gift to be a wonderful artist, an artist so good that what he made would come alive and save his life. And so it was from that day on, he drew and drew and drew for years and years and years and became one of the best known artists in that land we now call Japan. And if you were to stop anybody on the road and say, do you know about Joji? They would say, the boy who drew cats. He drew fighting cats and biting cats, sleeping cats and creeping cats, cats that were luxurious, cats that were victorious, cats that were curious, cats, cats, cats.
That was beautiful. Yes, it was. Okay. I am a cat lover myself, so I really appreciate it. I thought I had a back pocket. Okay, never mind. All right, our next storyteller is Joyce Orman. She has been telling stories all her life. Growing up as a child on a small town in West Sacramento, her playmates were animals and her imagination. She was an elementary teacher for 40 years, mostly in Clarksburg, and stories became a major teaching tool. In retirement, she discovered the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. Joining in 2000, she developed her storytelling voice and loves to share. I give you Joyce.
It was September 2014, and I went into the family room. There was a recliner. I laid down, turned on the TV to watch a movie, didn't even get through the title, and I fell fast asleep. And I slept very, very soundly for about 4 or 5 hours. Well, I woke up. The dogs were still snoring. I got up. You know how when you wake up and you're kind of foggy? I reached over, turned out everything. Last thing, reached over to turn out the light over the recliner, my reading light. There on the seat of my recliner was blood. I didn't know where it came from. I looked at the dogs, I looked at the cats, they didn't have it. It was me. I was hemorrhaging. I had never hemorrhaged in my whole life, ever. So, what to do? I didn't know. My insurance company, they have a night, all 24-hour time you can call and get advice. So I called, very nice lady. She calmed me down and she talked a long time. And finally she said, well, at your age and with your record of high blood pressure, I think maybe you should go to the emergency room. Okay. She said, can you get someone to drive you? I said, I can drive myself. I feel fine. I took my temperature. I don't have a temperature. I feel fine. I don't feel like anything's wrong. That worries me. I don't like coincidences. I went to the emergency room. They weren't too busy because by now it was 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And they weren't much help. They gave me a couple of pills and said, call my doctor in the morning. 2 aspirins, call me in the morning. So I went home. The next morning, I called my primary care doctor. Actually, I called my Dr. Aquino's medical assistant. And she said, oh, I've been trying to get a hold of you. Dr. Aquino wants you to go to the lab and take a sonogram. Okay. She just is concerned because of your age and your high blood pressure. Okay. So I went, and you should come here tomorrow afternoon. Okay. Next day. Well, Joyce, we have a problem. You see, your sonogram shows a little bit of a spot or a dark spot. And we don't know what it is, and we can't tell from that. So I'm going to send you to the gynecologist, Dr. Haskins, for some further tests. Okay. Dr. Haskins, hi. Oh, well, we have this little spot, and we don't know what it is for sure. But at your age and your high blood pressure, we thought we should do something more. And also because of those facts, I want to do a D and C. You've had one of those before, right? No. Oh, Well, normally I would do it here in the office, but because of your age and your high blood pressure, we have to do it as an outpatient from the hospital. Okay. I still don't have any kind of anything. I mean, I feel absolutely fine. Okay. Go to the hospital, outpatient, meet with Dr. Haskin again, and she comes in and she says, now, I don't want you to be upset, but you have uterine cancer. Oh, okay. Now, I'm the type of person that says, okay, what do we do? So she said, well, I've made an appointment with you with an oncologist, surgeon. And because this isn't really an emergency, I don't know how long it'll take. Okay. Dr. Elliott. I go see Dr. Elliott, and he said, you have the earliest cancer, uterine cancer I've ever dealt with. He said, I think you will be absolutely fine, but I can't guarantee that until after we have a hysterectomy. And because of your age and your high blood pressure, I suggest we just get rid of everything. Okay. November the 4th. Started out at the end of September, November the 4th, go to the hospital, everything removed, and it's great. And he says, you're doing so great, you can go home early. He told me I'd be in the hospital for 3 days. I was only there a day and a half, including the surgery. So I went back a few days later to, then take a few stitches out and stuff. And he said, well, here's the thing. You're not going to have to do a thing. You're not going to have any radiation, no chemo. The only thing you're going to have to do is come once a year for 5 years to make sure that nothing comes back. And he says, and it won't, because there was nothing. He said the cancer was encapsulated. It was not near any blood vessels. It was not near any lymph nodes. You are going to be perfectly fine. That's good. Hey, why do you think I had that hemorrhage? Oh, he said, I don't know. Must be a coincidence. Or either that or you have a guardian angel that sits on your shoulder. Okay. Oh, a little bit later, Dr. Haskin. I'm so glad we had such great results. Me too. Can you explain what the coincidence might be between the cancer and the hemorrhage? No, there is absolutely no. I can guarantee you this. The hemorrhage had nothing to do with the cancer. It's pathologically impossible. At least she didn't say it was a coincidence. Got back to my primary care doctor in a month or so. She is more friendly. She came, give me a great big hug, and she said, oh, I'm so glad. I am too. Do you think you could explain why I had that hemorrhage? Oh, she said, I don't know. I've looked at all the things. I don't see how it's possible that it had anything to do with the cancer. Coincidences bother me. I have to find out what happened. I'm terrible that way, real pest. So it's December. Now everything's behind me. I turn on the TV, find a movie, lay down in the recliner, don't even get past the titles, fall asleep for 4 or 5 hours. I feel something strange, like a warm blanket. Somebody put a warm blanket on me. It is December, it's a little cold. Maybe it's my imagination. I wake up, my dogs. I have 2 big basset hounds. They're looking around. And Rags, who can be very noisy, is softly saying, ooh, ooh. I stood up, I looked behind me, nothing. And I felt this warm blanket covering me. Now, I don't believe in coincidence, but I do believe this. My husband had died about 18 months before this. We went through almost 3 years, a long struggle with chemo and radiation until he said, enough is enough. I believe, and I will always believe, and I don't know how, but I know it wasn't a coincidence, that somehow my husband knew my personality, and he gave me that hemorrhage because he knew I wouldn't stop until I found the answer. And that's what I believe. And I have to tell you, you may not, but that's how I solved that coincidence. Thank you.
What a beautiful story. You know, love goes past this realm. Thank you. Okay, our next we have a poet. We have Mr. Joseph Finkelman. And Joseph Finkelman was born in Hollywood, California. He earned his BFA and an MFA in art in the San Francisco Art Institute. Professionally, he has been a commercial photographer, a credentialed teacher, and a landscape designer. He is a very talented fellow. He has written a book called Happy Tooth, and he's going to share some of his poetry with you. Joseph.
I've been racking my brains how to work. It's a coincidence into this. But I'm not. Luckily, poets get to read, and I found that out today, and I was like so grateful. So thank you all, because otherwise I would just thank you and walk off. Excuse me. Oh, does that need to be? Everybody can hear me though, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Close. Yes.
Everybody can hear me. That's scary, really. I wish my eyes weren't like this. Okay. I know who she is. I know my wife so well. She just walked down the hall, as she did 45 minutes ago when I heard the water swirl. I know she will sit carefully, as she did 44 minutes ago. I know she will walk back to her meditation corner, as she did 41 minutes ago. I know she will pick up the same book as she did 39 minutes ago. She will remember precisely what page, what word she had left as she did 37 minutes before. I know my wife so well that she will call to me to stop staring at her, as she also did just 28 minutes ago. She knows that I was not staring at her, but dreaming of a story that she had reminded me of while I was awake and not deep inside my own tattered head. For just 18 minutes this time. She reminded me that I had better put my shoes on and had said so just 13 minutes before. I know my wife so well that in 5 minutes she will sigh, not theatrically, but with resignation of her marriage to a man who would stare at his wife and think of wild stories concerning flowers whose names rhyme with regret and longing, scented with jasmine, and life pressed between pages, yet adorned in colors of dead lovers and cats. I know my wife so well that I move my chair and position myself so that she can be comfortable while she sits on the floor to attend my feet and put aside my dreams so that I can fulfill my duties that she has on her list, sitting on the table before me next to the scribbled poem that I'm now reading to you. East of here, it is tomorrow. There is a storm. Somewhere, a woman screams alone in the night. Somewhere, there is plenty of air, but not enough oxygen to breathe. Somewhere, in a dream, someone is falling, always falling, walking and falling, always falling. Somewhere near here, a lover looks into her love's heart. And you who know, tell me in your lives that desire awakens pity, that hope grows to affection, that admiration awakens generosity, that laughter awakens love. Tell me, you who know, tell me that when you no longer can hear and the center cannot hold and things fall apart, tell me, you who know, tell me of this, tell me more, you who know, tell me that west of here there is a tomorrow, that there is hope growing like crystals in a buried cave. In the darkness of a heart, there can be a field of peace, where I can now be dead for just one night, where I can be safe this night for once undisturbed by dreams, where my bed is not rough and crude, but filled with flowers that grow in the light, scented with sharp pollen. Tell me, you who know, that my wishes can be harvested fresh every day and placed like tableware, sweet like tea, hot like bread, but soft like love. The sacred plans of small spaces. It wasn't much when we started. It took writing in the journal, consulting the almanac, tasting the dirt and smelling the sky before we could buy the shovel and the rake. It takes a lot to turn dirt into soil, into the richness of life and death. We needed death to make life. Not everyone understands the importance of death. I had to learn that for myself. It was sand on top of then hardpan. I thought it was concrete. Like the workman in a hurry left a slurry on the ground for me to curse 50 years later. My neighbor looked over the fence, hearing my earthy labor and imprecations. He laughed at my first blind date with compacted clay. We added a lot of sweat to the water in each hole, a small covey of holes, to break up the dried riverbed of crude ceramic. A treasure underneath the not really concrete was another river, this of sand, explaining the riverine meandering course of millennia that made up of our small plot of land. We mix the now crumbled clay and sand and water, an admixture with dead chips of towering trees, liberal offerings of both compost and unscented, dried what was once sewage and scat. It takes a lot for soil to grow, but what it needs most is death. We had but one offering, the sacred remains of our cat, Leonard Cohen, recent of scamper and pounce, purr and play, his now cold small body was our bitter joy. The garden grew and bloomed, and it sang hallelujah to the sounds of a burning violin.
Thank you so much. Those were beautiful. Okay, now we have Christine Holman. Christine has a love of folklore, Bible stories, and fairy tales. For years, she has used fabric to create stories out of cloth with her home business. So inspired for 24 years ago. So Inspired is the name of it. I guess she started it 24 years ago. I started using this craft to weave stories through tales and songs. Occasionally, my mom and I teamed up to tandem tale for tea parties and various celebrations. Let us welcome Christine.
Well, I guess I'm the last one, right? The story I'm going to tell you is one that I wrote a while back. I got some ideas. They call them story seeds, where if you're listening to somebody else tell a story or you're reading a story, all of a sudden something comes into play and you go, ooh, I can use that. Or, gee, I want to say that the way they said that. And somehow it falls into your own story. Now, the story I'm going to tell perhaps really happened to me, and maybe not, but it doesn't matter. And name of my story is called The Protector. I was working late on Old Hallows Eve. The daylight was disappearing and the street lights were coming on. As I bolted the front door, I thought to myself, gee, which way shall I go home? It's getting dark. And I thought, see, I had two ways to go. The first was through a tree-lined street, old Victorian homes, beautiful gardens, open wooded lots. Although that was not my quickest way home. My quickest way home was through the old cemetery, which I took every day. Which one do you think I picked? Are you nuts? This is Halloween. Just thought I would ask. It was dark as I approached the old neighborhood. There was just a smattering of porch lights still on and flickering, grinning jack-o'-lanterns here and there. I could still hear the hoops and the hollers of the kids yelling at each other, winding down and going home as the festivities of the trick-or-treaters was on the way. As I walked, suddenly the air became very still and quiet. And all I could hear was the crunching of my shoes through the fallen leaves. As I walked, porch lights were being switched off, and my path grew darker with every step I took. And that is when I heard the footsteps. Now, they were a ways behind me, but I stopped and turned to let the footsteps go by me. There was no one there. I pulled my hat down and pulled my coat closer to me as a chilly north wind blew through all the trees around. I walked, and I could hear those footsteps fall into step with mine. I stopped. So did the footsteps. I walked, and the footsteps mimicked mine. I stopped, and so did the footsteps. I pulled my hat down a little close and kind of peered around my surroundings, and I was right along a large open wooded lot. And I thought to myself, is this a game? And I walked, and I could hear the footsteps crashing through the leaves through the open wooded lot. Suddenly there was a large crack of a branch. It made me jump, and then it made me mad. And I turned on my heel and I yelled out at that wooden lot, "Ollie, ollie, oxen free," thinking somebody would appear. Game would be over, right? No such luck. Just the wind blowing, casting dark shadows on my path. I walked, and I could hear those footsteps coming closer. And I tried to close my eyes to kind of pinpoint the direction of the footsteps. But in my scared mind, I went to prayer. Heavenly Father, please protect me. All I could hear was the wind blowing and the limbs and scratching the old trunks of the tree. And I knew in my heart there was somebody watching me from a grove of trees right over there. Suddenly, out in front of the bushes in front of me, a large black dog came with big stand-up ears and warm brown eyes. Shakingly, I took off my glove and I let him nuzzle my hand, and then he patted around the back of me, and he sat, and with those large stand-up ears and a very low growl, he addressed those trees. Well, I heard a cough or a curse, something, and then there was silence. And I waited. And then I looked at the dog, and the dog looked at me and gave me a nod. So I journeyed on, since I was still a ways before I got to my house. And it wasn't long before that dog turned and he kind of patted and followed me all the way home. When I got to my gate, I patted the dog. I said, "You're a really good dog. Thank you." And I opened up the gate to let the dog go in with me, but he stayed very stiff and stalwart. So I went in my gate quickly and I got into my house, and I was still really kind of shaky, but I was feeling so much calmer because I was home. I was home. And all through the night, while I made myself a cup of tea, I noticed that that big black dog sat like a sentinel in front of my house. And as I prepared for bed that night, I suddenly looked out the window and I saw a patrol car come around and park in front of my house. And the cop got out of the car and I could hear him. I drew an ear up to the window and I could hear the cop say, "Hey, rebel, you cool?" And that dog, that big black dog with those large stand-up ears, he looked to the right and he looked to the left. And then he gave his master a yelp. And the cop opened up the back door and that dog bounded right into the back of that car. And the cop saw me looking at the window and he waved. And I just kind of subconsciously waved back. And he got in his car and he drove silently into the darkness. I do believe my prayer had been answered. The protector.
We have had a wonderful story tell today. Thank you to all of our wonderful tellers. Thank you for all your patience when I didn't get back to you or didn't get the list done on time. And Suzanne, you are wonderful, that beautiful program that you designed, and thank you, everyone. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. And what is our date for next month?
That's celebration. That's November.
Oh, this is celebration.
Oh, yes, I have.
Okay, let's see, there's an announcement.
Yes.
Oh, that's okay. We have celebration on November the 3rd. That's all online. However, because it's so early in the month, we did something that we don't usually do. We're going to have a regular program on the 3rd Saturday in November. And it's short range. I'm the host, and the title is Gathering. And so if you haven't heard from me yet, you might be hearing from me soon. And then, of course, I don't want you to forget, we have a wonderful festival coming up on the 3rd Saturday in March. Please mark your calendars. And we have a little donation box. We collect money all year long to go toward this festival. So if you're so inclined and you enjoyed the program, please donate something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gloria, good job, Gloria.
Thank you.
Gloria.